Hello and welcome to a Firstpost PoV. All of us agree that terrorism is a global threat and that all countries need to be united to combat it. But when it comes to Pakistani terrorism or Pakistani-sponsored terrorism, India is left to fight this alone. All that unity is out of the window. The question is, why is the world, especially the Western world, so reluctant to call out and criticize and crack down on Pakistani terrorism? To understand that, let me introduce my guest, and he's one of those rare Western politicians who actually does call out Pakistani-sponsored terrorism everywhere in the world and especially in India. That's Mr. Bob Blackman, who's a member of the British Parliament. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to Firstpost.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about evidence first. A lot of foreign media outlets and even foreign governments have been asking India to furnish proof that Pakistan is indeed behind these operations, even though here in India it's very clear where this was plotted and who plotted it. Are you convinced about the Pakistani hand in what happened in Pahalgam last week?
Well, I think you have to look at the intelligence services and indeed what the evidence shows. This terrible terrorist atrocity that took place just over a week ago now was a well-coordinated, well-planned attack, and they were well-equipped. They had modern military weapons that could only have been supplied by one of the armed forces from across the world. We know that there are terrorist bases along the line of control where Pakistan continues to illegally occupy part of Kashmir and part of India. Those terrorist bases continue to operate, and Pakistan continues to support them and supply them. What we have to look at then is why is it, as you quite rightly say, why is it then that the West seems to turn a blind eye to these particular issues? The fact remains that these people must be apprehended, they must be questioned, and the backers of the terrorists must be held to account. It's not just the terrorists themselves, it's their support network and the people that continue to provide succor and support. And as such, therefore, what we should be doing in the West is not only listening to the wise words of the Indian Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Modi, on saying that the terrorists will be pursued to the ends of the earth and brought to justice, and also their backers must be brought to justice as well. That means that we've got to make sure that the network that exists of terrorism that's been going on for far too long to disrupt the lives of those people in Kashmir, leading to the problems of people cancelling visits to the beautiful part of Kashmir, leading to many businesses suffering as a direct result. All these things, I think, demonstrate that it is Pakistani-sponsored terrorism that is taking place. We only have to look back to of course, the times of the dreadful times of the Mumbai terrorist attack, which is that long ago, to know that this is part and parcel of the problem that India faces. And we must, in the West, we must call this out and continue to oppose what is going on, for not only for the peaceful coexistence of India and Pakistan, but also for the future of the West.
Now, Pakistan's strategy seems very clear. They are raising the spectre of a nuclear war or a full-fledged confrontation to sort of pressure other countries into talking maybe India into climbing down and not escalating things with Pakistan. Do you think the world is going to buy that strategy from Pakistan, or do you think they've seen it way too many times now?
Well, obviously, the fact that we've got two nuclear powers potentially in military confrontation is a serious risk to the rest of the world. But we've been there before, haven't we? I think the key point here is that what the United Nations Security Council should do, and indeed the West powers, should insist that Pakistan removes those terrorist bases from along the line of control so there can be no repetition of terrorist atrocities. Equally, if those terrorist supporters and their backers are continuing to exist in any way, shape or form in Kashmir, then they must be apprehended and handed over for proper judicial action to be taken by the Indian courts. Then we can get to the bottom of who was supporting them and what the supply routes were and so on, so we can make sure that this is not repeated again, which is obviously the most important thing. And I end, of course, in terms of this contribution by expressing my sincere condolences of those who suffered as victims of that terrorist atrocity. One of the problems here is that governments of all over the world will, of course, express condolences when India suffered this terrorist attack. But the crunch is that when it comes to taking the action that's required to prevent the terrorist atrocities continuing again, then governments seem to back off. I think we must give full support to India in making sure they cannot repeat these terrorist atrocities.
That brings me to my next question, actually, which is about the response in the UK. The Labour government has also condemned the attack, but they've not called out Pakistan. They've not named the Pakistani-backed terrorists. So if India were to strike back at Pakistan, which is effectively looming right now, how do you think the Labour government is going to respond? Is it going to caution India again, or do you think the Labour government will stand with India?
Well, obviously, I don't speak on behalf of the current government in the UK. However, we did have an urgent question on the floor of the House this week when the government expressed their condolences for the victims of the terrorist atrocity, but stopped short of providing support and indeed the necessary assistance that India would need to actually make sure that these terrorist atrocities don't continue. I worry that once India takes the necessary military action and this is where we have to be, either those terrorist bases get removed by the Pakistanis or else they have to be removed. And that probably will take military action by India. No doubt the UK government will then issue saying, well, we want people to be calm, we want to de-escalate the situation. But the problem is that India has suffered this far too often and obviously needs to take the action required to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And where do you think this reluctance is coming from? Is it because of domestic political considerations in Britain, or are there larger geopolitical reasons why the West and especially Britain is reluctant to condemn Pakistan?
Well, we've had calls, believe it or not, from certain government-backed MPs to send emissaries over to try and mediate between India and Pakistan. I mean, the fact of we are no longer a colonial power and haven't been for a very long time indeed. It's not our role to interfere in the domestic politics of India, and it's certainly not our role to try and intercede between India and Pakistan. What we should be doing is, as I say, be giving full support to combat terrorism wherever it rears its ugly head. And the reality is that those people that commit these terrorist atrocities must, as I say, be brought to justice. I think there's a real problem in the UK now about the number of Pakistani nationals that have come to the UK and therefore will put pressure on the Labour government and their Labour MPs to not support India at its time of need. My view is that you have to support your friends at the time of need and provide help and assistance, not back off for fear of raising domestic concerns.
Now, the Pakistani Defence Minister was recently asked about this and how his country has been supporting and sponsoring terrorists, and he simply turned around and said, "We did the dirty work for the West, including Britain." I'm sure you heard that comment. What did you make of it?
Well, I condemn it, absolutely. I mean, the concept that in some way, shape or form, Western powers are condoning terrorism against India is just beyond, well, it doesn't bear any scrutiny whatsoever. The sad reality is that this seems to me to be a smokescreen behind which the Pakistani authorities wish to hide when we know that they have been responsible for these acts of supporting the terrorists. And if they haven't supported them, they certainly tolerated them operating from where they've got military control. And they've got the duty to actually make sure these terrorists don't continue to operate. And the concept that somehow, shape or form that the West has been sponsoring this is a complete and utter nonsense.
Now, we touched upon the nuclear point briefly, and that's one reason why the world is intently watching what's happening in South Asia, and Pakistan is clearly using the nuclear spectre to its advantage. And my next question may sound a bit far-fetched or impossible right now, but the world has pressured other countries to give up its nuclear weapons or to give up their nuclear campaigns or missions. So do you think it's time that the world gets together, no matter how impossible it sounds, to tell the Pakistanis, listen, you're a rogue state, you're one bad day away from a military coup or a militant takeover. It's time to pressure the Pakistanis to denuclearize and give up those nukes?
Well, there is a real concern, I think, amongst many colleagues that the state of Pakistan, we're not quite clear who's in charge, whether it's the military or the government at the time. There have been suggestions. You make a reasonable suggestion about demilitarization and denuclearization of the army in Pakistan. The reality is that one of the concerns is that we've got, I think, in the West, is that Pakistan could actually lead to a breakup of Pakistan into various different provinces as a result of the failure of the government and the failure of the military to actually ensure that there is peace and stability in the country. Now, what we clearly don't want to see is nuclear confrontation between India and Pakistan. That will only end with, well, potentially millions of people dying, and that can't be in the interests of either state. But the reality is that India faces this challenge on its doorstep on a constant basis of how to deal with this terrorism, and hiding behind this nuclear arsenal doesn't help the position in relation to getting peace in the region.
I'd also like to talk about sanctions a bit. It's a weapon that countries tend to use against rogue states and terror sponsors. We've seen countries briefly flirt with the idea of sanctioning Pakistan, sanctioning some wings or agencies of the Pakistani government, but never broad-based sanctions like the ones we've seen against Russia or Iran. Do you think that's something the world community should debate?
Well, I think that I would urge the Indian government to publish the information they've got about Pakistan, making it very clear the responsibilities, so that the West can do exactly that sanctions, if necessary, can be applied. We have a problem in respect of certain diseases that we're trying to eliminate across the world, and some of those, for example, polio that still exists in Pakistan and Afghanistan. We want to eradicate those diseases as a world. We want to eradicate those suffering from those diseases so they don't suffer in the future. That's part and parcel of what we need to do. But when we've got a rogue state that's operating without seemingly any controls, it's very difficult to actually ensure that the international aid that's required to make this happen actually is brought to fruition.
Now, you're someone who has watched this area and India and Pakistan closely. And before I wrap up, just a question, why do you think Pakistan struck right now? And clearly, was it because of Jammu and Kashmir? Was it because the army was feeling vulnerable? As someone who's watched these two countries and the Pakistan army, what did you make of the timing of this attack?
Well, I think one of the aspects of the timing of this attack was that we have seen similar attacks take place when senior American politicians are in India. Going back to the Mumbai massacre, that was, of course, when we had senior politicians visiting India. I've had the opportunity of visiting Srinagar. I think I'm the last serving British MP to have visited Srinagar in the recent past. And of course, this is part and parcel of the problem. What the terrorists seek to do is to destabilize the area, destabilize the region, so that we get to a point whereby it's very difficult for visitors to visit this beautiful part of the world. That can't be allowed to happen. That disruption cannot take place. And we've seen, way back in 1990, the exodus from the valley of the Kashmiri Pandits, which was a deliberate attempt at ethnic cleansing. Those people were behind most of the culture and economics of the valley, and therefore it's very sad that they were literally forced out. What we've got to do is get to a point whereby we eliminate this distrust and make sure that security is provided in the valley, so that we can have the opportunities for commerce, tourism, and the opportunities literally for people to see this beautiful part of the world, which very sadly has been caused with these terrorist atrocities on a continuing basis. This most recent one being the worst one that we've seen, but nevertheless that's always been the threat. And just to give you an example from the UK, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office travel advice now is not to go to Kashmir, but to go to Jammu, but only to go by Jammu by air and not leave the confines of the city. I mean, that is tragic, I think, in terms of what we as in the United Kingdom are saying to our people about visiting this beautiful part of the world. And we've got to make sure that there is a position whereby security is provided for everyone, and these terrorists cannot and must not be allowed to win.
For all this time we've been talking, both of us have been referring to this attack as a terrorist attack and those attackers as terrorists. But you look at the foreign media coverage, including in the BBC, and they have an aversion towards this. They call it a militant attack and they call them gunmen. As a British taxpayer who effectively funds the BBC and as a British politician, what do you make of the BBC's reluctance to call these attackers who they are? Terrorists, nothing more.
Well, there are comparisons, of course, with other parts of the world and what's going on at the moment in between Israel and the terrorists in Gaza. The same thing happens there. The BBC seems to regard this as being that they may regard them as militants. We have to be very clear what they are. They're terrorists. And this terrorist atrocity, where they deliberately targeted Hindu men and shot them in the head using very sophisticated weapons, that just demonstrates to me is not some sort of militant attack. This is terrorism. The aim is to create terror amongst the population that is visiting the area. And so if you can't call them terrorists, I don't know what you call them. Certainly militants is not a reasonable position to be. And I think the BBC should be calling what they are, terrorists. We've called on them to do so. I repeat that message today. Label them as they are, terrorists. People that want to create terror and fear in the minds of just ordinary people.
These are all long-standing issues that we discussed, whether it's the reluctance to call out Pakistan or the bias in the media coverage, and looks like these are issues that are going to exist for a long time now. But it's important that people who are here in the media, as well as politicians like you in the West, raise your voice against it so that we can make a change in the long term. Thank you so much, Mr. Bob Blackman, for speaking to First Post.
And a very happy Gujarat Day and happy Maharashtra Day for all the citizens celebrating in India and in the UK.